Hey, it's Cory from Earthquaker Devices. Let's dig into the pyramids. The Pyramids is an incredibly deep and versatile modulation device that's built upon the same DSP architecture as our Avalanche Run. So this true stereo device is loaded with 8 different flanging modes, 5 rewritable presets, tap tempo with subdivision, both positive and negative feedback, a multifunction modify control, a wet and dry mix, and our exclusive flexi switching technology. So what on earth is flanging? Broadly speaking, it's an effect created by mixing 2 identical audio signals, with one of them being very slightly and continuously delayed compared to the other, that gets regenerated to produce an interesting comb filtering effect. Now, this can be an often polarizing effect in the guitar world, but when understood clearly, opens up a myriad of modulation possibilities. By manipulating a very short delay of less than 1 to 5 milliseconds, you can achieve silky jet plane whooshes, as well as chorusing, rotary and Leslie effects, automatic double tracking, tape-style warble, sequenced flanges, and many more unique modulation sounds. Now, remember, there are no hard set rules on pedal order, so typically flangers would lie somewhere after dirt and before your time-based effects like delay and reverb. Although, I would really recommend experimenting by putting the pyramids at the end of your signal chain, even after reverbs, to add movement and depth over the entire signal, which can emulate a warped record or tape warble. So let's take a look at the controls. The top left, we have manual. This controls the delay time of the modulated signal. Turn it clockwise for a shorter delay time and a higher pitched flange sound, and counterclockwise for longer delay times and a lower pitched flange. This is the parameter that can be controlled via expression pedal. Next, we have rate. This controls the speed of the LFO as well as the rise and fall time of the trigger modes. Turn it clockwise for faster modulation and counterclockwise for slower. Now, the rate control also has 3 ranges of operation: slow, normal, and fast. These modes are selected via the rate and tap toggle switch. After rate, we have width. This controls the frequency range of the LFO sweep. You might also think of this as a depth control for the LFO. At the top right, we have mix, which is something you don't see on a flanger every day. As you would expect, this is the volume control for the modulated signal. Feedback. This is the regeneration control for the modulated signal. Turning it clockwise from noon will introduce positive feedback, which is a much more metallic whooshing sound, and going counterclockwise from noon will introduce negative feedback, which is a much more hollowed out tubular sound. Modify. Now, this control performs different functions depending on which mode we're in, so we'll cover this as we go over each mode individually. Next, we have the rate and tap toggle. Normal in the center position is 1:1. In other words, the tempo you tap is the tempo the pyramids will spit out. When set to slow in the left position, the tempo you tap will be divided for a slower sweep, and when set to fast in the right position, the tempo you tap will be multiplied to deliver a faster sweep. Next, we have the presets selector switch. This will select between live mode and one of 5 presets. The pyramids comes with our favorites programmed in, but you're able to rewrite them however you wish. The pyramids is one of our pedals that really benefits from our flexi switching technology, which is an intuitive feature that enables our device to operate as both latching and momentary at all times. For standard latching operation, just tap the foot switch once to activate the effect, and tap again to bypass. For momentary operation, press and hold the foot switch for as long as you'd like to use the effect, and then release again to bypass. Next, we have the tap and trigger switch. This foot switch is a tap tempo control. However, in the trigger modes, this foot switch will trigger the LFO sweep whenever it's pressed. Finally, we have the mode selector switch. We'll select between one of 8 different flanger modes. The first mode we have is Classic, and Classic mode will deliver the iconic jet plane liquid silk flanging sound, as well as old school automatic double tracking effects in stereo. Now in this mode, Modify acts like a tone control for the modulated signal. Clockwise from noon is a high-pass filter, and counterclockwise from noon acts as a low-pass filter. Classic mode is extremely flexible, being able to produce both very pronounced sounds as well as more subtle modulation. So with hardly any feedback, low width, and a bit of high pass, and a roughly even split of wet and dry, you can achieve some great automatic double tracking sounds. So I'll strum a chord and bring up the mix, and you can hear the difference in stereo imaging. Now I'll increase the rate, the width very slightly, and add a touch of feedback for a chorused rotary speaker type of effect. The rotary speaker effect can be even way more interesting in stereo through zero. Now, in a typical flanger, you have 2 copies of the signal, and one of which is being modulated against the original. However, in through zero, both of them can be modulated, where they can actually pass through one another, where there's complete phase cancellation at the null point. And it's really interesting. It sounds like it's sort of disappearing into itself. This thing's really cool in stereo. So in through zero mode, the modify control will act as delay time for the unmodulated dry signal. This controls where in the LFO cycle the through zero point occurs, which is where you're going to hear the most drastic cancellation. Clockwise on modify is going to lower the frequency cancellation, and counterclockwise is going to produce higher frequency cancellation. Next we have the Barber pole modes, which create an audio illusion where there's an infinitely sweeping upward or downward flange with no discernible beginning, middle, or end. In the Barber pole modes, the modify will act like a tone control, just like in the classic mode. Trigger modes. Similar to the Barber pole modes, the flanger will still produce an infinite upward or downward sweep, except in these modes, the flange is triggered by your pick attack or manually via the foot switch. However, you can also trigger the flange externally with a drum machine or control voltage. Now in the trigger modes, modify will act as a sensitivity control for the sweep, clockwise for higher sensitivity and counterclockwise for lower. Now in trigger down mode, I'm going to be running a drum loop into the pyramids. And with the modify control, I'm going to be changing the sensitivity so only certain kick and snare hits will actually trigger the flange. Then I'm also going to be triggering it manually via the foot switch. I'm going to be controlling the harmonic voice with the manual control. Next, we have the step mode, which sounds kind of like a sequencer of a synthesizer that highlights different harmonics. The modify control adjusts the glide between the steps. So low modify settings produce sharp stair-step transitions, and higher modify settings will introduce a smoother glissando effect. In this step mode example, there's going to be sequenced harmonics being highlighted, and I'm going to bump the manual control to select a different series of harmonics to bring out. Finally, we have random. Random mode behaves just like step mode, except the sweep is randomized. The step and random modes are really interesting to use on keys and synthesizers because they're so rich in harmonic content. You can really accentuate these different frequencies by manipulating the width and manual controls in the pyramids. So I'm going to have a static sound coming out of my synth, and those will be the only two parameters that I change. With a pedal this deep and flexible, something that I really appreciate as a user is the ability to save your own custom presets, which is actually something that's really easy to do in the pyramids. To save a preset, all you would do is adjust the controls to your desired settings, press and hold the activate foot switch, then press and hold the tap trigger foot switch. So with both foot switches down, switch the preset rotary dial to your desired location and release both foot switches. Then the activate LED will flash and turn yellow, and that's it. Your preset is saved. I work with effects a lot in a studio setting, so this would be an example of how I would add a sense of movement and depth to an otherwise static sound. So I'm going to be running an atmospheric Rhodes piano melody into the pyramids, and piano already has a lot of frequency information in it. So what's interesting here is I'll able to use the modify control to filter out a lot of that low end throb. So all you'll be hearing is the modulation on the mid-range and air. I'll bring the effect in and out with the mix control.
Thanks for hanging out and checking out the pyramids with me. If you have any questions about this pedal or any of the other devices in our line, be sure to check out earthquakerdevices.com. See you next time.